So you get your new office? Are you guys moved in?
In boxes.
Oh.
We're moving to that for a few months, and then we're moving to our permanent place. So this is.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Nice.
The new one will be. The permanent one will be.
It'll be nice when it's done.
Yeah. The other one where we're at now is about as big as your office for all of us.
This is the sheet with all the games. Games played.
Is it official?
That's for you, Tim. So if I won't get stumped on the games. In case I misspeak, and I don't want you to be correct again. I want to make sure I got it right. Player participation sheet. Yes. I came well prepared. Yes. Okay. Just a quick comment about our seniors playing in their last home game. Certainly the ability to carry 2 years of winning at home, a great achievement and accomplishment that they can certainly leave feeling great about and be part of something that they built. That's a legacy. Those are hard to build here at Notre Dame, and then they can feel great about that. Winning the football game allows them to certainly move on and focus on this game. A game that obviously we have not won at Stanford in quite some time. So the focus is on, playing well on the road against an opponent that certainly has our respect. As I mentioned, they have beaten us at Stanford Stadium and certainly have beaten us here. So our guys will have to play well. They're very talented on offense, outstanding receiving core. 2 quarterbacks, and obviously it seems as though, either quarterback is extremely capable of playing well. Costello hasn't played the last few weeks, but it really hasn't slowed down their offense at all. Mills is extremely talented as well. Puts the ball, I'd say his accuracy is as good as we've seen this year. And then, to have such versatility at the wide receiver position and, probably one of the best catching tight ends in the country and, Parkinson. We love our tight ends, but this is a special player too. Weddington, Fahoko, I think Wilson, all of them are as talented of a group of receivers that we'll see. So we've got our hands full with this group. They've had to deal with a number of injuries as well, and playing some young players on the offensive line that are now no longer freshmen. They've played a lot of games and have gotten better each and every week. Defensively, similar structure. They've lost a lot of players from last year. Tuhu really stands out, in terms of his ability to get after the quarterback. I think he's got 8 sacks, very active player. Really like the way he plays. And again, I think from our perspective, it's been a stingy team against the run, and that's an area that, obviously we've got to be able to run the ball and continue to run the football. Again, injuries have beset them. They've lost their starting kicker as well. So a football team that certainly is dangerous, one that is playing in their last game. They're not going to play another game after this, so we'll get their very best, and one where we'll have to meet that and exceed it because it's a dangerous football team. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Hey, Coach, I'm not good on the injury math, but I wanted to get an update on Tommy Kramer, where he is in his recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's somebody that we expect to do something in the spring, but he's in the weight room. He's already working around the injury. No setbacks from the surgery.
And
From not the surgery, but from the rehab. He didn't have surgery, obviously, but he's doing quite well.
but no chance he would play in a postseason game?
Doesn't appear that that's going to be the case.
Okay. With Asmar, you know, he flashed pretty good athletic ability his whole career here.
Yeah.
But there have been other guys that have gotten jumped on the depth chart and you just never got to the top. What about him kind of kept the faith with you that maybe he would turn into this player?
Well, I think there was a hint of that, you know, in his special teams play. There was a physicality, and he wasn't, afraid's not the right word, but there was never a time where we felt like he wasn't willing to really mix it up and play physical. So we knew that there was a guy that was willing to get in there and be physical. We saw that in his special teams play. And then in his limited snaps that he did, in fact, have out there. I thought we saw some glimpses when Drew Tranquil went down that he could do some things, even though, you know, Jemark Heath was in there. We saw Asmar a little bit too. And then I just think, you know, based upon his physical traits, I know that Clark felt like he could get him to do the things at the linebacker position that we needed.
I noticed on this depth chart that Isaiah Foskey's on there this
Yep.
week, going back kind of his neck of the woods.
Yep.
What do you see as maybe where he is in his career right now and limited playing time, and what do you feel like he can turn out to be?
Well, we think he can be a very special player. Certainly, we wouldn't have saved him for this game. We feel like, you know, the pass rush is going to be very, very important. We held him out of a couple of games for that reason. We think he can impact our sub-package in particular. He'll be a starter in that sub-package, and we think he can influence the pass rush for us in a positive way.
Last one from me. You know, Phil Jacovic's got some decent playing time in this month, and he's gotten to watch Ian go through some different things, watch him recover from a slump, as you put it. What do you feel like he's been able to take out of this November in terms of his own progress, and maybe Brendan Clark too? What he's been able to get out of it as well.
Yeah, I think they do. You know, they're here every step of the way with meetings and the ups and downs. So they're pretty sharp and astute. They see the scrutiny of the position and understand how important it is to be prepared and be ready. There's great conversation that happens in those meetings that require you to stay on top of things. So when we're evaluating film and practice, you know, Coach Reese is really holding, you know, Ian and Phil to a high level. So you know, Brendan understands that, you know, you can't just come in here and, you know, just throw you away to the starting position. There's a lot of work that has to go into preparing, and so I think Brandon minimally walks away going, wow, there's a lot to this. There's a lot of preparation that goes into being the starting quarterback, as well as all the expectations. So I think they leave this first year, and Phil does in particular, one step away from being a starter, knowing how much preparation goes into being the starting quarterback.
Brian, Chase Claypool's journey to Notre Dame, literally and figuratively, was long to get here. How far has he come, not only as a wide receiver, but adapting to Notre Dame as a student, socially? It's a pretty big transition for him coming to a place like Notre Dame.
Yeah, it was. There's no doubt about it. And there were some growing pains along the way. But, you know, I give him credit and his mom credit, you know, growing up. And he's had to overcome a lot of adversity as a young man. And I think that, you know, he's a strong young man in a sense that the adversity that he's had here, I think he's been able to fight through those things because of what he's had to experience growing up as well. So he's, look, we all have our stories, I think Chase's story will be one where he got knocked down a couple times and he got back up and he kept fighting. And that's what I like about him. He has had every opportunity to go in another direction, and he has chosen the path that is going to make him successful. And that's a great story.
When did you know he was going to become the dynamic player that he has become now?
Well, I think that once he was going to get an opportunity to be featured, that was going to allow him, a chance to, to break out a little bit more. You had, Boykin, getting a lot of the one-on-one opportunities, and he was a lot of times to the field where he didn't get those. Once he was moved into that W receiver position, I thought it would be a breakout opportunity for him, and it turned out to be that.
As it relates to this weekend with Stanford, what are your thoughts on Costello playing this weekend?
I don't know. Obviously, we'll prepare. Both quarterbacks are outstanding, and so we can't change what we're doing. We can only go on who they are as a football team offensively at this point, and it's one that is going to be successful through the air. And both of those quarterbacks can throw the football. So we'll have to prepare as if either one of them is starting and set our game plan accordingly.
Thank you.
Brian, we've talked about false starts a number of times this year, and it seems like you guys have been using the clapping cadence as your base cadence. How long have you been using that before this year? Is that a chip thing, or was that something that you had used prior?
We've used it prior. It's easier, when you're dealing with the first-year center. It takes a little bit off of him, but it really has no bearing on false starts. The false starts are, staying locked in, staying focused. The week before against Navy, we had a defense that was moving on every snap. We didn't have any false start penalties. So it's a group that just, has to stay locked in on every play. And sometimes we're thinking about too many things instead of staying on what's important. And we sometimes get away from staying on what's important.
Liam sort of explained the challenge of you're kind of just sitting there waiting for the clap to hear the clap, and sometimes maybe you hear a different noise and maybe that distracts you. And I would think with a verbal cadence, there's more of a rhythm to that, so there would be less of the possibility for a distraction. Have you guys seen maybe defenses maybe making more noises, or you mentioned the pre-snap movement, to maybe try and confuse the offensive line in any way?
It happens occasionally. You'll hear some ambient noise of a move call or things of that nature, but we duplicate that in practice as well. So I just think it's get comfortable, be in the right emotional, optimal zone, and that stuff really should be, as I mentioned, secondary. It shouldn't be primary noise for you. Your focus should be on, what your primary responsibility is, and that is block the guy over you.
And then with the offensive line, besides the false start penalties, how do you feel like they responded to maybe allowing some pressure at the beginning of the game against Boston College and rebounding and maybe getting after Boston College better as the game moved on?
Yeah, I'll give Boston College credit. They did, their defensive structure was about as far removed from what they had shown in the previous 8-9 weeks than what they showed against us. And so we had to make some adjustments. Our offensive line had to make some adjustments in terms of what they were doing. Ian had to make some adjustments. They had been a cover 1, cover 2 team, and they went to a fire zone combination coverage and did some things up front that they hadn't done before. And quite frankly, you've got to make some adjustments, and we did. And I thought they did a nice job of, after it being kind of an uneven start, they hung in there and sorted it out and figured it out as the game kind of moved on.
Brian, where would you say your team has made the most improvement since the beginning of fall camp?
Well, I think consistency in execution and we had a lot of younger players that really are just younger in terms of developing in their particular positions, whether it be Owusu at Rover, or Drew White, or any one of the offensive linemen from Leon Eichenberg to Jared Patterson. Those guys obviously have developed. So there's been development across the board in every position. But I think as a unit, as a whole, on both sides of the ball, including special teams, just the way that they have gone from practice to a practice mindset to a game mindset, in the sense that getting ready for games is a whole lot different. You have to play physical, you have to play fast. There has to be a discipline. It's so much different than practice, and they really understand how to do that now, and that takes time.
I think you covered this once before, but was there a mechanical adjustment for Jonathan Dorr at some point this season? Because he's been different since we saw him in fall camp.
No, it's been more of a mental adjustment that he has made throughout the course of I'd say 6 to 8 months, and there's always little tweaks when it comes to the kicking game. If you get outside yourself a little bit, it might be your strides a little bit off or things of that nature. But most of his success from last year to this year is the mental performance piece, and he's done an outstanding job there.
Finally, best Thanksgiving side dish.
I'd say for me, it would be, I'd have to go with, it's a toss-up. I'm going to go with squash. Thank you. You wanted some kind of carbohydrate, I'm sure, but I'm trying to stay away from those.
Brian, again, with the injuries you've had on the defensive line, the guys you've lost for the season, the guys who've had to come out of games and things like that, talk a little bit about the young players who've stepped up, the veteran players who've stepped up, and how proud of you are you of the way they've responded?
Yeah, the first guy that hasn't really gotten much talked about, we haven't talked a ton about, but he's been just there each and every week doing a great job, is Kurt Heinisch. I mean, he's been steady, taking every snap, every rep, and you can't play the kind of defense that we're playing unless you have somebody that you can count on at that shade position like we have with him all year. He's been outstanding for us. As we've shuffled guys in and out of the lineup at the various positions, losing 2 really good edge players and Dalen and Julian, having guys banged up, obviously Myron, requires young players to step in. And Jamion Franklin, we mentioned him. He's had to play quite a bit this year after an injury. Jacob Lacey's been outstanding for us. Spears got his first chance to play a little bit, this past week. On the outside, Ovi has played a little bit for us and has shown some traits that we really like. Some physicality this past weekend really showed up for us. So, to have that kind of depth, and we haven't even talked about guys like Ade, who was all over the field for us and was a really special player. You can't have the kind of success we've had defensively if you all of a sudden have this huge drop-off. We've had a number of players step in and play at a high level.
The other question I have for you is the players who came out on the field before the game on Saturday, how many of those have a chance of coming back? And then what is the time frame of them getting information from the NFL and stuff? And then when do they have to declare whether they're going to go or not?
Yeah, the NFL is, that piece is generally the second week in December. You know, we're always fighting, you know, against the time, you know, the clock there relative to gaining that information. And what was the other part of the question?
Just basically when after they get all this information from the NFL, when do they have to let you know and the NFL know that they're going to either come back or?
Yeah, I think it's January 19th is somewhere around there. I could, you know, be corrected there as well, but it's you know, it's usually about the second week in January. So there's a tight window in there. Certainly we're, you know, we're doing work prior to that, right? I've already mentioned we've had conversations with a number of our players regarding what we think and what they think are in their best interests as it relates to those that have another year of eligibility remaining. Those that are not, you know, it's pretty clear what they're doing. So we had 30 players that are going to be graduating at the end of the year. Some of those guys have eligibility remaining. Those are the ones that, you know, I've sat down and, for the most part, had conversations with.
Especially when talking to the players, we've heard a lot about the next man in mentality. But obviously, to I guess sustain or even build on the success, especially defensively, it probably takes more than just a mentality. You've had some young guys step in and really fill in. What did you think that says about your development as a program, especially behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. I mean, it's not just about, you know, next man in. It's about building a championship defense, and you just don't do that, you know, in August. You know, you're building relationships and trust and accountability, and you're doing that after this season's over. You're doing it when you get back in the weight room in January. So, you know, this is a year-round process. It takes an army to build it, and an army in a sense of, you know, not one person, but a lot of people have to put a lot of time in, support staff, strength and conditioning, nutrition. There's a lot of people that have a lot of hands in helping build a championship program, and, you know, I'm very, very lucky to have a great staff as well.
And I feel like some years in the past, injuries have kind of derailed your season at the end of the year, but that obviously isn't the case. Is there certain things that you think are different right now?
I think we've built better depth, you know, better depth in the sense that, you know, we have, you know, 1 through 85 in our scholarship. You know, we started to look at, you know, from, you know, 50 down to 85 and how important those numbers were in terms of developing those players so they could step in and keep this thing at a, you know, at a high level. So just recruiting, I mean, recruiting depth in your program and developing that depth to be, you know, at a high level.
Hey, Brian. If you guys went on Saturday, you'd have 3 consecutive 10-win seasons, which has never been done here, and I realize in the past they didn't play as many games as you do now, but at the same time, I'm curious how important you feel that is in terms of establishing where your program has gotten to in terms of consistency and being a contender on an annual basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what, you know, everybody's trying to build a consistency within their program that, you know, where is the bar? Where do you set the bar relative to expectations, and what are your standards? And so, you know, our standards here are to, clearly, we don't play in a conference, so we set high standards for the kind of play that we want from our football team each and every year. And, you know, we don't put a number on it. We simply say that we want to graduate champions, and, you know, we want champion performances from our football team and our program each and every year. You know, what that looks like, sometimes we don't have control over that. You know, we don't have any control what bowl game we go to, per se. We don't have control over who the top 4 teams would be, even if we felt like we had a championship football team. So, you know, it's building a standard and what that expectation should look like in terms of how your team plays, you know, week in and week out.
I'm going to try and ask this differently. I guess, does 10 wins repeatedly, is that a sign to you that you're hitting the standard?
I'd say that's a pretty high bar, you know, to win 10 out of 12 games each year, given the kind of schedule that we play. I think that's, yeah, if you had that stock, you'd probably be pretty happy.
After the game Saturday, I heard something from you that I don't recall hearing. You said that you told your team that failure isn't fatal, which is a message I don't recall us hearing. How did you come up with that, and how were you able to take the guys that you had a month ago and refocus them into doing what they've done the past 4 weeks, as opposed to maybe allowing them to, you know, human nature would say that when they don't reach the goal they want, that maybe there could be some apathy?
Yeah, you know, it's an ongoing goal, you know, as I said to you earlier, is that, you know, outwardly, graduating champions, outwardly, is a degree and a ring. Inwardly, it means so much more, and you can continue to work on that every single day. So when we talk about failure, we also talk about the other side of that, and that is this elusive thought of perfection, because we're not after that either. And we're after excellence. And so sometimes our guys think perfection is what we're after, and we're not. You know, we're after excellence. And so we try to keep it real as it relates to in life. There isn't perfection. You strive for perfection, never really getting there. And there's always going to be failures. It's how you deal with them. And so it's real talk. It's about how we handle those things and grow from them.
Lastly, this week with the holidays a little different than normal. What will your Thursday look like in terms of the way the team celebrates the holiday?
Well, we'll have a short week in a sense of classes too, because Wednesday there are no classes. So we'll try to keep our practices about the same time, because we're going to play at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, which is 4 o'clock back here. So we'll try to keep our practices around 4 to keep the clock the same. But it'll be a little bit lighter in terms of their load. So they'll come in earlier, get some treatment, watch film on their own, and then we don't want to upset the routine. We did that a little bit earlier in the year, and that didn't seem to work out very well. So we're going to keep the routine about the same. And then Thursday go earlier, because we're going to be departing after Easter dinner, which we'll have together at the Morris Inn as a team.
You're on the topic of scheduling. What's your schedule next week post Stanford?
The coaches will be recruiting for the week. We'll get back in on Friday. And I'll do some meetings on Friday with players and staff on Friday and Saturday. We will then, prepare for, what our schedule then starts to look like. Coach Bayless will lift the team and have them in the weight room next week.
So will you stay out on the West Coast then, or
Yes, I will.
Get into recruiting as well?
Yeah, I'll actually travel further west and then come back and kind of keep checkerboarding as I work my way back to South Bend.
I want to follow up. You said this on your radio show a couple of weeks ago about, I think there was a listener question about team speed. And you said offensively we're sort of above average compared to the teams we're trying to compete with.
Yeah.
How do you push that forward? What do you think that the biggest markers you have to hit moving forward are in that area of recruiting?
Yeah, I think it's not just on offense, it's defense too. We want to continue to look at speed at the defensive back position. speed at the running back position and wide receiver position. All those skill positions, I think we have to continue to aggressively recruit that position of speed. Make up speed in particular at the cornerback position, I think is one of the traits that can overcome a lot. I think the charge that I've given Coach Polian and the recruiting staff is to let's not get too caught up on what position they play. Let's really focus in on that speed element in those position groups because I think that's got some room for growth within our program.
This might tie into the recruiting, but this is Saturday presents you an opportunity to really have the upper hand in the series for maybe the first time since you've been here. Is that significant in recruiting when you're going head-to-head against Stanford? There's not a huge pool of kids who are looking for the academic athletic combination, even if Stanford and Notre Dame are not exactly identical.
I'm not sure I understand the
Just
question.
in terms of if you have the upper hand in the Stanford series, how significant is that when you're out on the trail, often recruiting against Stanford?
I think those things always help when you win the game, but I think there are some clear distinctions between the two schools that we have seen over the last few years that start to separate the recruit as it relates to whether they go to Notre Dame or whether they go to Stanford. But there's no mistaking a win over a school that you're recruiting some players is going to be helpful. But I think what we've seen more than anything else is that there are different distinctions between the two schools as well. Thank you, everybody. Yep.